Tanner, Dave, how are
Man,
y'all?
how's it going?
Long time no see, my friends.
No, buddy. How's it going, man? It's good to see your face.
Yours as well. I mean, I've been trying to get on this show for years now, so I'm glad I finally got a shot.
You made it, man. No. We were just laughing, man. We got to talking about Malauzai days and where everything began. And funny enough, I mean, I learned a ton from Chris. So it's pretty cool, man. It's good to see you. And all
Yeah.
of these years and twists and turns, and it's like everything coming back together, man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, they joke around about the industry and how small it is and large at the same time, but it seems to be coming full circle in many ways. And cross paths with folks from Malauzai and other areas all the time. But really good to see the two of you again.
Yeah, man. Well, why don't you start, man? Give a little bit of background and intro. I mean, obviously there I was there for some of your background, but I mean, you've done a lot of different stuff, and I think kind of like me, certainly in the early part of your career, you jumped around and saw a lot through digital banking and integrations and all the different parts and pieces, and I think that makes you a product guy, right? More than anything, and that's kind of where you landed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny because the running joke at Q2 is that I hold the record for the most number of different positions across the company. So I've been there for, I guess next month will be 10 years, which is hard to believe given, where you and I started out at Malauzai. But when I left, I started off on the product side, running the team of mobile product owners and the development side for that, and learned a ton. Even dabbled a little bit in the security space for authentication, third-party vendors that would, complement our offering in the markets and strengthen our, biometrics and whatnots. And then, over the course of the earlier part of my career, I've moved into a solutions consultant, sales engineering role, which, to be quite candid with you, is one of the positions that I learned the most throughout my time at Q2, because that's where you're interacting with banks, on a daily basis. You're speaking with not just the C-level folks, but also the folks that are doing the daily grind of operations support the technology. And so you hear those problems, you hear their issues, what they're trying to solve for, and it gives you a perspective on things that maybe are available within the platform, but also are things that maybe you need to consider from a roadmap perspective and try to solve for. So that was a huge, huge value for me personally in my career. And then I hit a point where, kids come around and babies, and my wife's like, "Hey, no more traveling every couple of days, hitting the road in the middle of America." So settled down, and that's when I made the move over to what is now called Helix by Q2, formerly Q2 Open and Banking as a Service. But at that point, I moved into a product manager role, kind of running the overall product strategy for Helix. And that was quite a learning curve for me, because at the end of the day, Helix is a modern real-time core. And having spent the bulk of my career on the digital banking side as the front end, now you've got to switch your mentality, your thinking, and figure out what is it that you're building out for these fintechs, these brands, these neobanks, and also for financial institutions, but doing it with the banks, the sponsor banks, that is, their regulatory, their compliance folks in mind. So that's became a true, I wouldn't say, definitely a challenge, but also a great learning experience for me as well. So I spent some time doing that, and then moved into a role as a head of the relationship management team, managing those banks. I'm sorry, those fintechs and those brands. Again, a great experience. And then over time, again, kind of moved into back the solutions consulting. So that's currently what I'm doing right now. Is I'm the senior director of strategic solutions. Involves a little bit of the product side, and then also running the team of solutions consultants that engage with our clients, our prospects, which primarily are made up of fintechs, brands, and neobanks.
Yeah, I think it's funny, man, that you get to see now where, so early days, guys, when Chris and I first worked together, I was on the sales side and he was always in product implementations, internal things, right? And you probably see now why, man. I'm always running back to you after a trip and I'm like, I have 200 questions. Can you answer all those, right? And it's a cool, to your point, it's like when you played on both sides, you end up picking up a lot of cool stuff, and so you see how things need to be run and managed, which gets interesting. So talk a little bit. I want to hear just kind of your general view with the backdrop from, because I think you got a cool perspective, man. You played the, let's say, digital delivery side. Let's
Mhm.
help the institutions build the best digital and build the institution's brand, right? And then you've played the other side of let's help the institutions be the sponsors to power the fintech brands, right? And I know that everybody else out there wants to look at these two things like they're in some major conflict or it's a dogfight. But I see a little bit more symbiotic there, and I mean, you get to see that interaction between the two, and that's been messy and wild. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because for us on the Helix side, a lot of our sponsor banks are actual Q2 digital banking clients. So we do separate the two, right? And don't engage too much on like their front end and those experiences, and focus more on how they're helping us, really be part of a tri-party relationship with ultimately our clients. So from that perspective, again, you kind of have to change your mentality and your way of thinking. And for me, that was a little bit difficult, right? Because I'm used to trying to solve for a specific problem. Oh, you need this product, you need this feature. Let's go ahead and figure out how to build that and launch it and get that done in X amount of, months, weeks, days, whatever the case is. Now it's much different because you have to do that with the sponsor bank in mind, because lesson learned, they are the ones that are obviously holding the compliance, the regulatory, they're on the hook from an audit perspective. And so it took a while for me to really think through, okay, yeah, we have this feature available. Why is it that you can't, necessarily turn it on right away? Or why is there this process to determine if this particular client or prospect is able to enable it or not? So bringing it, full circle from the product side of things back into where I am now, it makes the sales process a little bit difficult. I'm not going to lie. That's both a good and a bad thing. It's good because it shows our prospects that our bank partners are serious about the compliance side, that they're there to not be a hindrance to developing new features or products, but it's really to make sure that they're protecting their clients and that they're protecting themselves as a bank, as the ones that are providing that sponsorship, that FDIC, that BIN sponsorship. And so it takes that education for those prospects as well to understand, hey, I'm being asked all these questions. It may feel at times invasive, but it's to protect really all parties involved. And so for me, it's a good thing. Does it drag out the sales process? Sometimes it does. But if you have the right prospect and you have the right partner, I think that solves itself, to a certain degree.
I mean, you're damn right. I'll tell you what, I talk to people a lot about, the narrative that it's zillions of dollars and it's so difficult. And really what it's missing is you. So, I mean, the guy that's in there going, I get it. I get it from all aspects, from both sides. And I see where the holes in the boat are. I see where our problems are going to come. And we can kind of head those off at the pass and really get this in a more compliant, less expensive way to implement things that are on a higher compliant scale. And us waiting around, for regulatory to step in and all that kind of stuff, which is finally happening. And I just pound the table to everybody. This is a good thing. This is maturity. It's maturity. It's not a bad thing at all. One thing I want to give you such a compliment, if I can. I can't find the words to ever talk about people like you and Tanner that, there's doers and people that
Texans?
talk a lot.
You mean Texans?
Well, yeah, Texans. We're bigger. That's all. We have to shrink our screen down.
There you go.
Be giants. But there's a lot of talkers out there that haven't really done this or done that, or they got super limited experience at it. The depth that people like you bring from just past integration experiences and compliance issues that go along with all this type of stuff, and weird things that'll happen in an app store update, right? Okay. Just there's a million little things that come into play. Without that level of experience, you're actually listening to people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. And when they can get in a room with somebody like you, I think it's a huge benefit.
Agree.
Oh, I appreciate that, Dave. And really, I think it's all about empathy for the bank, right? And that extends to both the digital banking side, but also in the banking as a service. And while our sales folks, right, they view our fintechs, our brands as the actual clients, the bank is also our client, but they're really more of a partner, right? Because at the end of the day, without the bank sponsor, there is no banking as a service. There's no way for us to add value to that relationship. So it provides a very different experience, compared to some of our colleagues and competitors out in the market, where we really want to emphasize that tri-party relationship, which again, it leads itself to having a little bit more of a sales process in length, and extends out the due diligence. But for us, yes, we sell to that fintech, to that brand, to that neobank, and then we also have to sell that prospect to our bank sponsor, because they need to take that fine lens and think about the fact, is this, company going to be financially viable for the lifetime of the contract? Are they doing the right things, in their day-to-day outside of what they're trying to do with this banking as a service program? And what are they doing when it comes to security and compliance? And these are things that I believe often get overlooked. And again, to be candid, I was, when I first started in this part of the company, I was baffled by why we had to go through this process with the banks. But it makes complete sense when I talk to my peers on that side of the business and have them explain, well, this is what the regulators are coming in and asking for. They're looking for proof that we have, access to an administrative site that shows all the data around these customers that are part of this program, that we have the ability to do an audit of the KYC or the onboarding process and access these, results. So it's making sure that, they have visibility into the entire program, and also that they have that direct agreement, honestly, with the fintech themselves, so that it covers their bases, again, with the regulatory entities and the compliance and auditors in mind.
It was great, man. I think that full circle, it's like, I mean, you deal with the same thing that I do, where it's all these different competing perspectives, right? And it's like, I know what the fintech or the brand is trying to accomplish, which could be very different. Even that side of the world has 8 different types, or 100 different types, right? Depending, and the ethos of each of those companies is different. I mean, if we're talking to a Target, a Walmart, a Home Depot, their use case is a heck of a lot different than a Chime, right? Et cetera.
Well,
Absolutely.
you can run into things that you haven't run into before, like, in another state that we're talking about where that account is open and you're trying to close an account, let's say a debt account, right? And just mysteries that come
to light.
Didn't see that one coming.
And they come to light in a bad way,
That's
right? And so you have all these different perspectives. I think on the fintech side, you've got the different perspective from the bank side, and then you guys literally trying to sit there in the middle and have built all the software to make all the parties work. But then you got to work the people, right? To your point, and get everybody, the stakeholders on board and try and find the common ground.
Yeah.
That I don't think that a lot of times between all those parties, they can even see the common ground, but it is common ground, right?
Exactly. And it is a very much an educational experience for our prospects, because they view this as, okay, you as the banking as a service provider, as a technology provider, also bring the bank relationship. And so we don't need to even probably talk to the bank. Maybe there's some interactions during the implementation. But from our perspective, it's completely different. It really is, hey, every single time, starting with the sales cycle, when we meet a prospect to get a little bit further along, we bring our bank partners in, have those introductions, expose them so that they can ask those questions. Because the last thing you want to do is be speaking with somebody that you feel as though there's a good potential partnership relationship there, but maybe there's something that we're missing because we are not a financial institution. I'm not a banker. And so, my counterpart at one of our partners is going to be able to unearth something that might be a deal breaker, or maybe a regulatory issue that says, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit for us right now, or maybe it's something later if they correct X, Y, and Z. And so it really is quite an eye opener for us to be able to bring them in and have those questions asked. And it makes it, like I said, both good and bad. The bad is just, really for the protection of everybody, in general. So
such a difference, Mr. Know-it-all versus, hey, we actually listen.
I know. And I mean, look,
right?
I have to comment on the fact that there's a lot out there of, to your point, folks that are trying to be in the area that you guys are in. And by the way, have been in for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you guys have got, I bet on the banking as a service side, close to a decade, maybe 7 years, something like that. Yeah. A lot of experience at Q2 in this space.
Big name players.
Sure. And if you think about it, you should be the guys that are screaming software, 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 right? Which I'm not saying that you don't have awesome software, but it's like software and automation seems to be like the marketing trend right now in this space. And I believe what you're saying, right? It's that obviously we need to have the flexibility in the tools, right? So that we can check the boxes. We need a seriously heavy software hierarchy to go along with it, right? And roles and permissions and everything else. But to your point, I think the people and the ops that go into the workings of the relationship is literally just as important. And I feel like it's being forgotten right now. Right. And so I love that emphasis.
No, it absolutely is. And the reality is that when in the earlier days, when we were starting out, you were able to sign a client and get them in front of the bank and the implementation. And then the actual operations staff of the bank's like, what is this? What are they doing? How are they expecting to, run this program? And now we're so tightly aligned that it's an afterthought, right? They've gone through, they have the peace of mind that everything was caught up and evaluated during the due diligence, during the sales process, so that when the implementation starts, okay, we know exactly, what the capabilities of this program are, this client has, and making sure that we're able to align on what those milestones are to get them live and into the production environment. So one of the things that I think is different for us compared to some of our competitors is that we are the actual core processor. So we're not putting it on the bank's core instance for their main business. And that took a while to get folks kind of rallied around from a true financial institution perspective, because again, the operations folks, they are living and breathing their, for lack of a better phrase, their legacy core, on a daily basis. Now you have Helix. This is a side core that I have to go learn and operate. But what we found and what they have found as well is that, again, with the regulators coming in, they want that separation to a certain degree, and love the fact that you have separate controls and systems in place for what you're doing on the banking as a service side compared to your main, whether it's consumer or business banking, instance.
I have a tough question. I know you have one too.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I always do.
All right, it's a frustration for me, man. I talk to tons and tons of fintechs and brands, to your point, and a ton of them that I talk to, their minds or what they've been educated to have gone directly into BaaS platform framework layer, right? They don't even know that working with an institution is a possibility, right? And so it's like, I feel like a lot of, it's hard to say competition, right? But less bank-centric providers, right, that try and put the sponsor in the background.
That was him trying to be politically correct. I'll walk through this
damn connectors. There you go. They want to sit there and they want to be fintech brand centric and just say, don't worry about all that compliance stuff. Don't worry about the regulatory. We've got bank partners. You just sign up with us and all is well. We've seen a lot of fiascos explode out of that, but I think the byproduct, to your point on the sales and marketing side, a lot of the fintech landscape doesn't even understand that there's these opportunities to work more closely with a sponsor and with folks like you guys. So you run into that too?
Tanner, that makes my daily life really difficult because, to your point, they don't know about this type of model. So it's an educational experience. Now, the compliance and even the technologists at our prospects, they get it and they're excited about it. But some of the business folks, they're like, hey, we just want to get to market, as soon as possible. Your competitor over there is saying we don't even have to talk to the bank. We can just go ahead and sign one contract and be up and live in the market in, 2 months. While we would love to be in that model, the reality is that everything we just talked about with making sure that you've got the right controls and processes, the contracts, the agreements, and proof points, that's where they really need to be at. So we view it as coming full circle. Are we feeling the pain right now because there are opportunities that maybe we lose because of a quicker path to contracting? Absolutely. Do I think that maybe some of those programs are going to be in, I wouldn't say trouble, but have some sort of compliance or concerns 2 or 3 years from now and maybe coming back again full circle? Absolutely. So again, it makes it difficult, but when we have the rights, not just bank partner, but also the prospect / clients, it makes it a lot easier. And so with that, it also helps us qualify out some of those, unfortunately, fintechs or brands that may not be here in 2 or 3 years, or may have a need for a program that is really not about growth, but it's really just trying to solve for one specific pain point that is using the bank for, just the sponsorship or the BIN sponsorship. So it's painful, but it's also good for both the bank and for Helix in the same vein.
100%.
Something we stress a lot to everybody is like, the first question ought to be is, how do I unwind this son of a bitch, right? And if you can't figure that out, then you probably got bigger problems. But the education piece of this, I just am begging all the bankers out there, you're going to get left behind in a big way if you don't at least take the time to educate yourself on what banking as a service is and what opportunities are out there. It's a really wide open space right now. Everybody's, maybe it's mature. Guys, it's not even close to mature yet. Yeah. We're just now entering the phase where people have gone through. You got a few black eyes here, you got a few, pat on the backs there. And then you see that here comes the snake oil salesman, right? And then you got everybody. I talk about this with like the bond disasters with SVB, and all of a sudden everybody's a bank expert,
right?
And it pisses me off. It really does. that, and when I see the same thing happening in the BaaS space, where all of a sudden everybody's an expert, and it doesn't work that way. There's people that have earned their stripes like you guys.
That's right.
And listen to these kind of people that can tell you the truth. They'll also tell you, here's what I would watch out for. Here's the things you might want, and here's what I maybe see coming. I can smell it, but I'm not sure yet. And it's not pontification bullshit. It's experience. And this experience in this space has now reached, like you said, a decade.
Yeah.
And there's some badasses out there. And
Yep.
listen and learn from everybody.
Well, and the math bears out what you're saying, Chris. I mean, if you looked at the fintech programs, the brands that are using the connector hands-off approach, lots of logos that churn in a big way, right? We don't see the large, sophisticated, successful folks. They're 100% on board with your model and that close relationship with a sponsor bank.
Yeah, and for example, we take phone calls and meetings from a lot of interested banks that want to understand a little bit more about what it means to be a sponsor bank in general, but also within Helix by Q2. And we have a responsibility, right, to help to educate as well, because it would be really easy for me to go tell one of these banks, yeah, you just need one or two people just sitting around, and you may have to go and manually review a KYC a customer every now and then, but we take care of everything else. That's not the reality. I mean, we want them to be set up for success. We don't want to have reputational risk for the bank, nor for ourselves, nor for our client. And so there are times where we say, hey, look, you probably need to do a little bit more of an analysis around your resources and what it means to really get into the space, because we're excited, but we also want to make sure that you're prepared for what the reality is in certain cases on a day-to-day basis. Which is why in our model, it's interesting because we have a bank deposit and a bank operations team on Helix. And at times there's a little bit of friction between sales in that group because they handle that relationship with our bank sponsors. And there's times where, we're frustrated because something might get held up in a due diligence process. Can you give me this document, from this prospect that they need to go get from their corporate office? It might take 2 weeks. Well, it takes 2 weeks. It is what it is, but it solves and checks that box and we're done with it. Versus those that maybe don't ask that question. There might be some sort of finding that will put them in trouble, once the contract gets executed and they're live in production.
That's excellent. I have one more question on this topic. So a lot of conversation, I think the regulatory piece has been interesting. Some of the new guidance, I actually am a big fan. I think it's a good thing. I think it shows maturity. I'm getting a ton of questions from people right now of, are we seeing a slowdown on the fintech side? And we talk about VC funding to that world, et cetera, et cetera. I'm seeing a massive increase in the brand side, right? Like let's say S&P 500 logos, and definitely a decrease in the challenger side. There's a lot of cool, niche fintech things that are out there. And certainly, specific loyalty brands that are doing well, but definitely a decrease in challengers and an uplift in brands, loyalty brands. Are you seeing the same thing? And do you feel holistically like we're heading the right way?
Absolutely. I see the exact same thing happening. Last year, 2-3 years ago as well, we were taking phone calls from startups, from VC funded, companies and brands and fintechs that's had an attractive product, but as you start to peel back the onion, is this something that I can envision them actually, their customers adopting or really gaining traction, or are they just trying to solve for something that is specific to their business that isn't really benefiting all entities, all parties, including their customers? So now, for us in particular, we're not just focusing on the brands and those large entities, but taking a very careful approach to the prospecting side. And what I mean by that is, the question really starts with, is this a prospect? Is this a company that we could put in front of our bank partner and pass the test, the smell test initially?
Right.
And for us, that smell test really is in the form of what we call just a program summary. All that is just a document that we put together for that prospect, has some high level funding, has some money flow diagrams, has background on what they're doing with their core product today. And then we give that, and we also assign some risk ratings to various things like implementation, financial, onboarding. And then that gives the banks, some insight into, okay, is this somebody that we think could go before our committee, our BaaS committee or our executive committee? And if so, then let's engage and have kind of that next level dialogue and next level meetings and discussions. And then we iterate from there. And that's at the point where we bring in our sponsor banks to, be involved much more in the sales and the due diligence process. But back to your question, Tanner, with those smaller VC funded startups, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there are a lot of things that have to click for them to be a reality for not just our bank partners, but also for Helix by Q2. So naturally, it's much easier to engage with a brand or a large company that has already insight and knowledge into what they want to accomplish within this space, has the controls, has the compliance and the regulatory and operational insights to actually execute. Does that make our sales cycle much longer? Absolutely. But I think we benefit in the long run because it might be fewer deals, but they're better opportunities that in the long run will be successful for all parties involved, including our bank partners.
Excellent. Perfect. Yeah, I one thing I want to kind of throw in here. I think it's important that we all get better at, what is my bank's focus here? I'm trying to raise fee income, or I'm trying to, where's my, I'm growing assets or growing deposits, or to enumerate that to an end zone point with the brand, right? With the FinTech brand. This is a good fit for you for this purpose. This is a good fit for that purpose. The other thing is vocabulary. Middleware. Man, that doesn't mean anything anymore. Shit. I mean,
that was a big word 20 years ago.
So yeah, I don't know what the hell that means anymore. It's like digital transformation. I'm so lost.
I think me and Chris have worked on that our whole lives, and I don't know what it means.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's elements out there. I'm glad to see you using Sidecar and things like that. It's a much clearer picture at that point of a ledgering system that does compliance with me, and it's a partnership relationship. It's not just somebody that's coming along. And I think to do a scolding moment here for a little bit, and we got our asses kicked over this because we called out some things early on and really pissed a lot of people off, but ultimately those are the same things that cost us
a lot of the big headlines.
So, yeah, a lot of the big headlines that were not positive headlines that really set this place back a little bit as far as where the banking industry needs to go. This is the future. This is where this is going. Whether you want to call it embedded finance on the merchant side.
It's the next evolution of commercial, man.
Yeah, BaaS banking on the brand side. Whether it be how many different credit builders or how many different buy now, pay laters. These are all these different things that are coming into play, and they're mainstream now. Get your ass in gear. Get on board with this. And these people and these brands and these nomenclatures and things that have confused this issue so much actually have slowed down the momentum of a very positive thing. The regulatory side was going to come anyway, so I don't think it sped that up or did any good.
Absolutely.
It did good. But here's the thing. We don't have time in banking and community banking to wait 15 years to figure this shit out. It's going to eat you up and spit you out, and there's going to be winners. I mean, big winners. They're very big winners. The other thing that's working on your side right now, which is so good, is that you don't have to do it the way to take the most successful people out there and say, how did you do it? That is not the way you want to do it today. So there's a better, faster, smarter way to do these things. And man, I'm loving the fact that you're on here with us. This is so cool. Because these are the really cooler, better ways to do things that they weren't mature at that point in time, or the way when things got going in 2008. There's better opportunities right now than ever before, and at least get educated on these things. Have a conversation with Chris, man. I mean, he'll shoot you straight.
Look at where Chris is at, right? I mean, look at the track record where we started the conversation of all the stuff you've seen and done. Yeah. And you think from the Q2 perspective, like, where do you put your rock stars that can figure things out? And you're in that spot, man, which says a lot.
You have it.
It really says a lot.
No, I appreciate that. And again, it all starts with empathy. Whatever part of the business you're on, whether it's the front end digital banking side or banking as a service, empathy with the bank. And it's not the most popular opinion, especially for somebody that's in a sales role, trying to sell the fintechs and brands. But in the long run, it's going to make for a better relationship. And those that you're selling to fintechs and brands, they're going to be here for the long run and are set up for success because you did it the right way.
Well, that's a true partnership.
That's why I wanted to point out, you guys have got some major home run players that you've dealt with. So you're not rookies in this space. You're not only dealing with the small level players. You're experience in depth, and it's worth a conversation.
Yeah, I'd say there's 3 or 4 folks with a track record of success that are in the conversation like you guys, right? Amongst the dozens of junk that we all deal with. And I mean, I think we're all at the point where it's a little frustrating because trying to speak to all these different groups that can't see all sides. Almost every other provider and player is very one-sided and who they're focused on. And you've got to be empathetic to all parties for something to be symbiotic, right? I mean, I've heard you say that over and over, and I think you're dead right.
Fantastic.
Final thoughts, man.
Final thoughts, man.
Final thoughts. Anything you want.
I just want to say thank you to the two of you. I know it's been a while. I follow it tremendously what you're doing in the space. I think from an educational perspective for the banks in particular is huge because it's not happening, I feel like, enough throughout the market. And so it validates what we're doing on the Helix side. And while, like I mentioned, it makes it a little bit difficult for sales sometimes and fintechs and brands, I think in the long run, we'll be in a much better spots. And I think we'll be set up for success with our bank partners.
Agreed. It was good to see you, man. I missed you. Let's catch up and have a beer soon.
Absolutely. You guys take care.
See you next time.